Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your co-host, Shaq. We're going to be talking UFC Milwaukee, UFC on Fox 31, Kevin Lee versus Iaquinta, the rematch. And Shaq, it's going down this Saturday in Milwaukee. A lot of Rufus sport fighters on the card, but more importantly, Kevin Lee and Al Iaquinta get to run it back.
Yeah, man, Rufus Sports one of the best camps out there, and they got a lot of great fighters from Milwaukee. And I just love this main event. Kevin, he does talk a lot of trash, but I mean, this guy's entertaining. He knows how to sell a fight, and I like him. So he's not bad himself. And the co-main events and the feature fight are great as well. So I'm excited.
Yeah, you talk about the co-main event. Anytime you have a fight with Edson Barboza, sign me up. And now he's taking on the streaking Dan Hooker. This is a kid who moved up to 155 pounds. He's been finishing everybody he's been fighting. And now he's taking on arguably one of the most devastating strikers in the lightweight division's history, Shaq.
Yeah, Hooker, I mean, he's another case of one of these guys that moved up a weight class, and things are definitely going a lot better for him. And Edson, he's been a perennial top 5 guy for most of his career, some of the most devastating KOs in UFC history. So we know what he brings to the table.
Yeah, and real quick, before we break down this card, dude, that Max Holloway performance we saw last week, that was some once-in-a-lifetime type shit. That was a master class. That was absolute perfection. Have you ever seen anything like that? I mean, what was your reaction, dude?
Yeah, man, it was a great performance. He's proven to be probably, top 2, 3 pound for pound if he keeps going at this rate. I really don't think anyone at 45 is going to beat him. I mean, it might be time to just go ahead and move up to 55s, man. I mean, I think he's got some of the cleanest striking. He gets better every single fight. He's still, in his prime age, and he's still got a bright future.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And obviously, he could go ahead. Look, he can retire today and go down as one of the greatest at featherweight. But what I think, look, he could go up to 55, like you said. But, dude, there's a couple guys left at 45 that I want to see Max Holloway fight before he moves up. And I'm talking about a guy in Renato Moicano. And I know this one, you might laugh at, but I want to see him and Frankie Edgar. I'll tell you why. I know Frankie Edgar falls short every title shot and this and that, and I definitely got Max to win that fight. But for Max to, Max is going to be a legend no matter what. He's going to go down in history. But man, just having that Frankie Edgar name on your resume, only a select few have that. And I think for Max, it would just elevate his case that much more to being the greatest featherweight of all time. Because, even though he beat Jose Aldo twice, Jose Aldo can at least say, hey, I beat Frankie Edgar twice. So for Max, I think it's important. Just get that win out the way. You know what I mean? Get that fight with Frankie Edgar in there. Let's get that name on his resume. And then I really have to see him fight Renato Moicano. And then also, there's the Zabits, there's the Yairs, all those guys coming up. I'd love to see that. But the ones I have to see is Renato Moicano and Frankie Edgar. What do you think, Shaq?
Yeah, I agree. Hanato, he's gotta beat another great featherweight first before he can worry about Max Holloway. But yeah, I'd like to see that fight down the line, depending on how that performance goes. But we'll see. We'll see how he does against Jose first.
Yeah, absolutely. You can never count out the legendary, the all-time great Jose Aldo. And man, these two have been talking mad shit. I don't know if you saw that video that Jose Aldo put out, but he said that Renato's not a Brazilian. And this fight's in Brazil, so I'm curious who they're going to be screaming, "Eu vamos at." You know what I'm saying? Because it's Brazilian on Brazilian crime, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see how it goes down. Did you see that video Aldo put out?
Yeah, man, and it's interesting that it's interesting that Jose said that he's not Brazilian anymore because he moved to Florida to train at one of the best gyms in the world. But it is what it is, and they'll settle their differences in Brazil. And it's interesting to see two Brazilians have beef like this because when Renato asked for the Jose fight, they thought it was disrespectful. They thought that Brazilians shouldn't be fighting Brazilians. So I'm glad that they're getting to do this.
Yeah, they took it personally, and to me, it's like almost like when when Volkov asked Black Beast to come out to Russia to fight him. They just took it very personally. So man, I can't wait to see this heated battle between Moicano and Aldo. Well, Shaq, let's break down this UFC Milwaukee card start to finish. First up in the heavyweight division, we got Juan Adams. He's minus 440. And the comeback on Chris De La Roca is plus 350. Now, Shaq, Juan Adams is only 4-0. He's minus 440. But Chris De La Roca, he's only had 7 pro fights. You think Juan Adams is the rightful favorite here?
This is interesting because Adams, his fight on Contender Series, I mean, he fought a complete bum, and you could definitely tell he's a little green. He's only been a pro for a year and some change, I think, maybe. He's definitely still green, still developing. De La Roca, the thing with him is why he's, such a big underdog. He was the underdog his last fight as well, is because, I mean, he's a punching bag. He's a tough, a tough workman-like fighter, but I'll give him that. He does have a tremendous amount of heart, but, he is kind of making steady improvements, I guess, from what he first came in with the first 2 fights to winning his last one. So, I do think the fight's going to play out a little closer, but, one thing De La Roca can't not do is not get tagged off the brakes. Once they separate from the clinch, he just has the tendency to shell up and need a 10-punch combo. So, I do think Adams has the better cardio, but it's going to be interesting. I definitely think both guys are going to, eat shots, and I do think this will be kind of one of those sketchy favorites for a little while.
Yeah, I feel you on that, man. I got a ton of respect for Chris De La Roca. Obviously, he comes out there and fights his heart out every single time, win, lose, or draw. And, he went out there and finished Rashad Coulter that last time out. But in this spot, man, I mean, with Juan Adams, even though he's 4-0, he's handled those 4 opponents accordingly, all first-round finishes, all first-round knockouts to be exact, Shaq. And, I mean, you're dealing with a 26-year-old in the heavyweight division that's 6'5" with an 81-inch reach. So, I got a lot of respect for De La Roca, but I think that Juan Adams is probably going to do work here, and I think he's the rightful favorite. I'm picking him. Now, next up in the middleweight division, we got Zach Cummings. He's minus 320. The comeback on Trevor Smith is plus 260. Now, Shaq, Zach Cummings just lost to a 55er. He's minus 320 to beat an 85er. You think he goes out there and does it?
Yeah, this fight could possibly, with Trevor's size and his D1 wrestling ability, this fight could definitely play out a little closer. Cummings definitely, he's moving back up to 85, so maybe he feels a little better. But, this fight's really interesting because I do feel like Cummings is on the decline a little bit. His fight with Tractor, he didn't look very good to me. I didn't think either of them looked too good. And Trevor, one thing with Trevor Smith, he's just not very good at winning. He's not very good at taking punches, I think he's got a great size, great body. He looks real big, like a serious athlete, but when it comes to taking punches on the chin and when it comes to just winning, he's just not very good. So, this fight's very interesting. I do lean Cummings. I do think the line could be a little closer. Zach looked real sloppy his last fight, so I'm interested to see if this weight cuts if moving back up to 85 is going to play a factor. But I'll take Cummings here by, a tough, gritty, ugly decision. I mean, both guys like to block punches with their head.
Yeah, I really don't know what to make of it because what's he going to look like going up a weight class? But I think these guys that have been moving up have been performing pretty damn well, and maybe this is what Zach Cummings needed to do, in a couple of those fights, especially that Gunnar Nelson fight. You saw how much bigger he was than him, so now those 15 extra pounds, it could benefit him and Trevor Smith. Look, we can say what we want, but the dude's kept his job in the UFC for 5+ years, so much respect to him. And what he likes to do. He's typical grinder. So for Zach Cummings, it's about can he deal with it. His last fight he couldn't deal with it, but his last fight he was in there with a Brazilian tank named Michel Prazeres, third-degree black belt. Trevor Smith isn't that. And Trevor Smith has also been stopped early in a couple of his fights, and I have seen Zach Cummings go out there, knock out Dominic Steele right away. So who knows? Maybe Zach Cummings gets a first-round knockout in this one, but most likely I think it's a back-and-forth, grindy-type fight, but I'll still take Zach Cummings for the victory. Now, next up in the light heavyweight division, we got Adam Milstead. He's minus 150. The comeback on Mike Rodriguez is plus 130. Now, Shaq, Adam Milstead said if he loses to Mike Rodriguez, he's going to hang up the gloves. You think he gets one more UFC win here?
Man, another tough fight. I feel like Milstead, he's just a basic tough guy, man. I just think he's a guy that's willing to exchange big power in the feet. He can box. It doesn't seem like he likes to shoot takedowns. And then on Rodriguez, on the other hand, you got a more cleaner, smoother, technical fighter. But he definitely kind of likes to fight at a slower, just more rhythmic pace. As where Milstead, he likes a brawl. So it's going to be interesting. It's a matter of who can keep the fight in their realm. Can Rodriguez keep this thing, on the outside and make it a kickboxing match, and can Milstead, exchange power with him and kind of out tough it. So it's going to be a good fight. I definitely think Rodriguez has room to improve from his debut, and Milstead, I really don't feel like he is going to improve. I feel like that's just his style. So yeah, I definitely see why Rodriguez is a live dog this weekend. And I'm gonna take him here too. I think Milstead's a tough guy. I could definitely see this becoming a war, and I could see Milstead taking it. I do feel like Rodriguez has a tendency to kind of shell up when when big punches are exchanged inside the pocket. But it's a good fight. But I'll take my Rodriguez.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting fight while it lasts. Obviously, like you said, Adam Milstead, he's definitely a brawler. He goes out there, he hits hard. Shout out to my boy Dan Tom. I think he said, I think the way he described it was, Adam Milstead's that guy that, he puts on his hard hat, he packs his lunch, and he goes to work. You know what I'm saying, man? He's a hardworking American. He works 11 hours a day. He's not a full-time fighter, but I still respect the guy a lot. And Mike Rodriguez, you're dealing with a freak athlete. The dude didn't even have a strength and conditioning coach in that Devin Clark fight. Still went all 3 rounds, still landed the harder shot standing. But, listen, I know Devin Clark, we can sit here and make jokes, but, the guys out here beating him are, Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic. So, and my boy Alex Nicholson, who was up there, contending for that $1 million, knocking fools out on PFL. But bottom line is that I think that Mike Rodriguez, I heard an interview with him, and he said the week after the Devin Clark fight, he basically said, "Thank you very much, Devin Clark, for teaching me that lesson," because right after that, he hired Calvin Cater's strength and conditioning coach. You guys know what kind of shape Calvin Cater's in. So with a guy who was already this freak athlete, I mean, obviously you've seen him go out there, land flying knee knockouts, and I'm not just talking about on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender. He knocked dudes out with that same move on the CES regional scene as well. You guys know in Massachusetts, that's the top. That's the NFC of Massachusetts. It's the CES. The NFC of Texas is the LFA. So he did his thing on that regional scene and knocked guys out with flying knees. But man, I think that he can also keep this fight at distance. He's got almost the same reach as John Bones Jones. He's got, I believe, an 83-inch reach. The guy's he's a freak athlete. So now with a real strength and conditioning program behind him, I already thought that he had raw talent. Adam Milstead, he's a just middle of the pack brawler. He's exciting, fun to watch, but I think that Mike Rodriguez is going to pick him apart here, land the better shots, stay on the outside, and I want to say keep it pretty, but it's not really going to be pretty because Adam Milstead's face is going to be very bloody when he's running into all these straight shots, because you know what beats a loopy shot, right, Shaq? It's a straight shot down the middle. So I'm actually going with the underdog Mike Rodriguez here. Now, next up in the featherweight division, we got Dan Ige. He's minus 170. The comeback on Jordan Griffin is plus 150. Now, Shaq, I believe this is the first Rufus Sport fighter up on the night. Jordan Griffin, you think he's going to get it done for the squad?
Yeah, Griffin's an exciting, well, you can't really call him a prospect. He's a vet. He's got 22 fights. He's one of those typical, fighters that, they kind of struggle with the takedown defense a little bit, but he does have a nonstop motor, and he does, continue to improve as the fight goes on. And Ige on the other side, he seems like more of a powerful, explosive, top position type of guy that likes to finish. And Ige, he's I wouldn't say his striking's anything special. I think it's just basic. I don't think he's a real power threat by any means, but he is willing to bang. He is Hawaiian. He's a tough guy. But I think he's got a cardio issue, and I think he's limited physically. I think, as we saw in that Arce fight, uh, he gassed out. I mean, his techniques were inefficient. I mean, he was flopping to his back. I mean, that he's how those specialists are. He's a wrestler. He's a grappler. If he can't get that fight in his realm, he generally doesn't do well. But he did drop Luis Gomez on Contender Series. But even after dropping him in that first round, they come back out the second round and he's getting taken down, and it's getting real sloppy. So this fight's going to be real interesting. It's just going to be a battle of, how much does Griffin get taken down? I think he does get taken down maybe a little bit early, but I think he survives it. I think he wins the last 2 rounds, and I think he wins a hometown decision down there in Milwaukee. I think he's the better striker. I think Ige will slow down in the second and third, and Griffin will win a close decision.
We were talking earlier about how, a guy like Juan Adams is making his UFC debut with a 4-0 record, but Jordan Griffin is making his UFC debut with a 17-5 record. So this guy, he's been there, he's done that. So don't expect too much octagon jitters from Jordan Griffin. We're probably going to get I'm not going to say finished product because he is a very young guy, but we're going to see a disciplined, mature fighter out there. And with Dan Ige, we know what he wants to do. We know he wants to throw a big overhand right and then get on those legs, try to take your back, try to pound you out. Do whatever it takes on the mat. The guy trains with Khabib, hangs out with all those guys, and he's a very, very talented fighter. Interestingly enough, he's a smart guy too. He's actually a manager too, so much respect to my boy Dan Ige. And what's different to me about him, than other specialists, like, for example, you remember with, like, Rusimar Palhares and Ian Entwistle and all those guys, when they couldn't get their, or even Charles DuBronx, who we'll talk about later on this card, if they can't get their first-round leg lock or just the first-round jiu-jitsu storm going, they kind of do fold up. Well, Dan Ige has got a little bit of Hawaiian in him, so if he can't get his jiu-jitsu storm going, he'll just take the ass whooping like a man, so I really respect that guy. But the thing with this matchup is that if he can't get it going past that first round, Jordan Griffin is the kind of guy that'll take over in that second and third round. He's that experienced. He's been there. He's done that, like I mentioned. And also, when you watch his submission loss in 2014, because obviously when you're capping a fight like this and you know that Dan Ige, allegedly has this grappling advantage, he is a black belt. Jordan Griffin is a purple belt. You got to go back and watch Jordan Griffin's submission loss. And I will tell you what. He is not a quick tapper by any means. He tried his hardest to fight the hands and hold his breath as long as possible on that choke, and basically he had no choice but to tap. But it was a real struggle. It was a real battle. He made that dude work for that choke. And that was a couple years back. I can only imagine how much he's progressed. So the point is, even back in the day, Jordan Griffin was super tough. So, I don't think there's going to be, this isn't going to be like that Mike Santiago fight where, one takedown and the fight's over. It's not, Mike Santiago's been submitted 100 times. So it ain't going to go down like that. I feel like if Jordan Griffin can make him work, he can take over in the second and third round. And I'm going to go with him to actually get this upset via decision. Now, next up in the middleweight division, we got Jack Hermansson. He's minus 160. The comeback on Gerald Meerschaert is plus 140. Now, Shaq, Jack Hermansson came through against Talis last time with an injured rib. Now he's minus 160 against Gerald Meerschaert. A lot of action's been coming in on the very experienced, the very tough Meerschaert. Meerschaert's another Rufus Sport member. You think he gets it done here as the underdog?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this fight a lot. I like Hermansson's style, as I mentioned in the past before. He's got good movement side to side. Arguably one of the best top games in MMA. I mean, how many guys has he finished with ground and pound? At least 3 or 4. And, GM3 on the other end, he's a super experienced guy. I mean, this guy, he was one of those guys that got thrown into the gauntlet, right off the bat as a pro, earned his way. I mean, I don't know how many fights he had before he got into the UFC, but a lot. And, he's just an experienced guy, man. He just knows, what can I say? He's very calm under the line of fire. I mean, he's just experienced. So it's kind of hard to gauge him sometimes because he definitely isn't the most athletic guy. He definitely, isn't the strongest guy. But, he just finds a way to make it work. I feel like Hermansson's definitely the better athlete. I feel like he's faster. I feel like he's got the better boxing. But if adversity does present itself in this fight, that's the type of things that GM3 thrives off. Man, he's only got one loss to Maheda Santos. I know Maheda also knocked out Jack Hermansson, but it's a tough fight, man. But I'm gonna go with Jack Hermansson. I think it's gonna be one of those cases where Meerschaert just falls behind. I feel like the third round's gonna be a little hairy just because I feel like Meerschaert's that type of fighter. But I'm gonna go with Hermansson by a close 29-28 decision in Meerschaert's hometown.
Man, this is going to be such a good fight while it lasts. I'll go on record and say that I think Jack Hermansson has the best movement in the 185-pound division. Yeah, I know my boy Elias might have a problem with that, right, Shaq? But I really do think Jack Hermansson does have the best movement in 185 pounds. And every single fight, he's been putting on size because you watch that UFC debut and, he was a little bit of a smaller 85er, but now you see him in that fight with Talis Latis, put the injury aside. Dude was looking huge out there, and obviously, if he's on this strength and conditioning program, he's taking his Flintstone vitamins every day. I think that we're going to be seeing, a more physical Jack Hermansson here because, obviously on the feet, like I said, man, the guy, he's feinting, He's landing big inside leg kicks. He doesn't really throw his hands as much standing, but on the mat, you remember when he first said that he had the most vicious ground and pound at 185 pounds? At first I was kind of like, dude, I mean, he pounded out Brad Scott, no big deal, but the way he pounded out Talis Latis, one doesn't simply full mount and ground and pound Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt Talis Latis. That's the only stoppage loss in terms of strikes on Talis Latis' resume. That's a guy that went 5 rounds with Anderson Silva, right? Jack Hermansson went out there with a massive injury, with a cracked rib, a broken rib, whatever it was, and I pounded him out in that third round, and it was very quick too, man. I mean, he's pretty vicious with it. So as far as this matchup's concerned, Gerald Meerschaert is as tough as they come. He's the kind of guy that he's so experienced that he tapped out Sam Alvey on the regional scene. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? So my boy Gerald Meerschaert's definitely been around the block once or twice. So as far as this matchup, I think that Jack's the more athletic guy. I think he's the more powerful guy. But he needs to make sure not to gas out here. You got to manage that gas tank in this fight because you slow down on a guy like Gerald Meerschaert, he's not just going to tee off on you, Shaq. He's going to finish you, Shaq. So there's always a chance that Gerald Meerschaert catches him with something slick. He's got great chokes, a nice body kick, just that veteran experience. But overall, I think that Jack Hermansson will prevail here. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got Jared Gordon. He's minus 150. And the comeback on Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva is plus 130. Now, Shaq, a newer member of Rufus Sport, and Jared Gordon is competing here. Gerald Meerschaert's the team captain, but here, Jared Gordon, he's the new guy. You think he's going to defeat Joaquim Silva?
Yeah, I like Jared Gordon. I like his pace. I think he's a tough guy. Neto BJJ, I also like him. I like his get-up game, his power. He's actually, a pretty good technician. The way I see this fight playing out, I see Gordon trying to implement his game plan, either doing it slowly or just coming out and charging at Neto BJJ. But, I just think that Neto, isn't this sloppy brawler that everyone thinks he is. I think he's got clean shots, and I think he'll, pick Gordon apart from the outside. I think Neto's cardio can and I think it will hold up for the 3 rounds. I know Gordon's got great cardio. He's one of those, what I like to call those slow pace, high pace type of guys. He's fighting high pace. It's definitely a high work rate, but he's definitely, labored. It's definitely slow. But, I just think Neto's going to be too strong. I just think he's going to bruise him up. I think he's going to feel the shots. When you see a guy like Carlos Diego Ferreira, get off on the feet that early in a fight. We just saw Carlos Diego Ferreira get lit up early, in the first round, his last fight. Carlos isn't a free flowing guy. He's the fact that he got off that early against Gordon lets me know that I just don't think Gordon's going to be able to get away with his sloppiness. Exchanging the pocket with Neto BJJ. But Neto's definitely got to manage his cardio here. But I think he will. I think the loss against Pichel, I think it was a minor mistake. I felt like the fight honestly could have went either way. But I feel like there was just more threat of one-shot KO power in that fight. So I think he'll be fine here. I think he'll land the harder shots on Gordon if it goes to 3 rounds. But I also see a chance of a possibility of a knockout as well.
Yeah, Jared Gordon's a guy I have a lot of respect for. Obviously, he has an unbelievable story, and much respect to him. Very inspiring. And also, he goes out there, he's a tough guy. He'll take one to give one. And it doesn't matter if he's cut up, if you're cut up. He's just a fun guy to watch. I really enjoyed his beatdowns of Mitchell Quinones and Hakran Diaz. But the issue here is that he's not fighting Mitchell Quinones or Hakran Diaz Shaq. He's fighting Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva. And Joaquim Silva, like we mentioned with Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon comes out of a great camp with Rufasport. Joaquim Silva also comes out of a great team with Evolucio Tai. You know guys like Francisco Trinaldo. He's trained under Andre Dida. So they got the entire game under control here. They got it under wraps here. So basically, the way I would break down Joaquim's style, so you look at the guy and you think that, he's just, this big Brazilian musclehead and he's going to gas out after 1 round. But it's actually quite the opposite. It's really intriguing to watch how he paces himself because you go back and you watch that fight with Reza Madadi, and let's preface this with the fact that this fight is in Sweden, and Reza Madadi is Alexander Gustafsson's teammate. So if you're gonna fight close against Alexander Gustafsson's teammate in Sweden, most likely you're going to lose, and in my opinion, Neto BJJ was able to go out there and make that 2nd and 3rd round decisive. He got taken down in the 1st round. Much respect to Reza, who I believe is either an Iranian or a Swedish state champion wrestler. Someone can comment on the YouTube comments and correct me. So he got taken down in the 1st round by the wrestler who has taken down everyone else that he's fought in the UFC, the same wrestler that finished Michael Johnson. So no big deal. You got taken down in the 1st round. That means you got to come back out and win the next 2. So what happens next 2? All of a sudden, it's not so easy to take down Joaquim Silva. All of a sudden, he's pushing down on the head, pulling the leg out. All of a sudden, it's nuts on the forehead, and it's Reza Madani that's getting lit up in that fight and losing the 2nd and 3rd round in Sweden. I thought that was an impressive performance. I mean, he knocked out Andrew Holbrook in about 30 seconds. Andrew Holbrook beat Jake Matthews, right? And then the fight with Vince Pichel. Even in defeat, that was, in my opinion, his most mature performance to date. I feel like Vince Pichel is a very powerful guy. I feel like he's a lot bigger than Jared Gordon. He's a lot more powerful. In my personal opinion, Jared Gordon should fight at 45. In Jared Gordon's opinion, he should also fight at 45. In the UFC's opinion, he should fight at 45. But in Duke Rufus's opinion, he should fight at 55. So that's the only reason he's fighting up this weight class. But, Joaquim was fighting with guys like Vince Pichel, who are massive. Vince Pichel is a guy who one-shot KO'd Damian Brown. Damian Brown's known for his durability. Damian Brown's known for these Fight of the Night wars with Frank Camacho, the John Tug fight, the Maestro Kim fight. You don't go out there and knock out Damian Brown. And Vince Pichel knocked out Damian Brown. Obviously, you remember his other performances where he's going out there and suplexing guys. And, when he got suplexed too. But more importantly, you know him as this strong physical guy. Well, he picked up Neto BJJ over his shoulder and still couldn't take him down. So I just feel like the improvements that Silva's making here are going to win him this fight, man, and are, more substantial than Jared. Jared's got his game down pat. That's what he does. Take one to give one, and that's going to work against, these guys, like I said, like Mitchell Quinones and Hakran Diaz, who's not on steroids anymore. If they give him Devin Powell, that's going to work against Devin Powell. But the reason I don't think it's going to work against Joaquim Silva is because when I think Jared Gordon walks in, I think he's going to be met with some big shots, and I think he's going to be countered all night long, potentially knocked out. So I do have Joaquim Silva here. Now, Shaq, next up in the lightweight division, we got Drakkar Klose. He's minus 250, and the comeback on Bobby Green is plus 210. So, man, Bobby Green's back at it again. You think he's going to talk some shit and box Drakkar up as an underdog here?
Man, I'm a big Bobby Green fan. Always have, always will be. Drakkar definitely looked good his last fight against Lando. I like how he just came out, set the tone, and put it on him. This fight's gonna be real interesting, man. These guys have definitely been talking a lot of shit on Instagram. I definitely feel like Drakkar, is clearly the younger, fresher, you can say hungrier, more energetic fighter. Bobby's, prime is probably, past and gone, but Bobby's still a savvy fighter. He can still, shoulder roll and box. But personally, I just think he just I think in this particular matchup, or even against these up and coming guys now, just the way the game tends to go, I do think he's going to be on the defensive a lot here. I think he'll hold his own, of course, but I just think Drakkar is just going to be too physical. I think Drakkar is going to move forward, throw his calf kicks when he can, tie him up, just use his typical, lab style, man. Just be the rougher guy. I think Bobby will definitely land some shots here and there, but I just think Drakar's work rate, his size, his physicality is going to be a little bit too much for Bobby.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think that the calf kicks are definitely going to add up. He Drakkar Klose has been pretty damn impressive, man. You went out there, destroyed Devin Powell. I could sit here and criticize that he didn't finish him, but you know what? No one's finished Devin Powell. All these guys, you just go out there and beat his ass for 3 rounds. No one finishes him, so he took care of that job. Mark DeCasey derailed that hype train. Lando Venata derailed that hype train. I was on Lando in that fight, and after the first calf kick, it was at that moment, Shaq, that I knew I was fucked. So, Drakkar's definitely been impressing me. Now, let me bring up the Tamor fight, because I know he got frustrated in that fight, but the fact that he was putting his hands up in the air and he was talking shit kind of leads me to believe that Bobby Green might actually be able to, I don't want to sit here and say get into his head, because we're talking about some very high-level fighters here, but make him fight, that kind of street fight, that less, I don't want to say less mature, because, these are 2 professional fighters, but, make him talk shit back and forth. Get it into Bobby Green's type of fight, because Drakkar, he's tried to fight like that in the past. So if Bobby Green can get it into that kind of fight, I think that he does have a chance here. However, it's most likely going to be Drakkar with the discipline, calf kick, MMA lab, push him up against the fence, kill the clock type decision. So I'm going to go with Drakkar Klose by decision here. Now, next up, we got Andrea Lee. She's minus 245, and the comeback on Jessica Rose Clark is plus 205. Shaq, a lot of people thought the line was really wide. Are you one of those believers?
Man, it's hard to say. I definitely feel that Andrea Lee is a well-rounded fighter with a lot of potential. I know her debut opponent, Macedo, a cupcake type of fight, but she definitely showed her skill set. She definitely shows what she's capable of. She had 14 fights. She won 12 of them. She's fought some of the top 10 outside of the UFC. So, she's definitely experienced. She's definitely going through a lot of, other shit on the outside. Rose Clark, definitely you could say a little underrated, man. She definitely beat Paige Van Zandt. And, the eye fight, I feel like it was just a case of, she ran into something that's, the top, 3-4 girl in the world. Eyes doing her thing right now. So,
hey, Shaq,
I still have a lot of respect for Rose Clark. I definitely feel like she has a couple of advantages in this fight, and her being her size and her boxing. I definitely feel like she's the better puncher of the 2. I like Andrea Lee's kicks, knees, elbows. She's definitely got that game down pat. It's gonna be a tough fight. I definitely do feel like the line could be closer. These female fights, for the most part, always tend to, fairly be close. So, there's definitely value in the dog. You're going to have a chance at the end of the day. Will you win? It's tough, man. Lee, She's solid, man. She's well rounded. I mean, there's not really much I could say. She's definitely got a tougher opponent. She's definitely gonna have a lot more resistance. So I'd be careful both sides. But I'm gonna personally sit back and watch it. But I will take Andrea Lee by close decision.
Shaq, you mentioned how Jessica I is, number 3 or number 4 in the world. Well, the rankings came out today, and Jessica I is number 1 in the world. So, I personally want to apologize to Jessica I because, this year, last fight we definitely showed her more respect, but the first 2 fights going into this new weight class, I was completely counting her out, and I think it's because, after that Leslie Smith fight, I was high on Jessica I thought that she might be the one to go out there and beat Ronda Rousey, and then after that Meerschaert fight, I gotta say, I jumped off the bandwagon. Then you see that Sarah McMahon fight, but hey, my girl Jessica I, she faced adversity like a fucking champ. She's ranked number 1 in the world right now, Shaq. There's nothing else to say. She has a number 1 next to her name. So, that's pretty fucking awesome. It shows that you can overcome anything. 4 losses in a row, should have been cut, was called the biggest joke, all these things. And now she's number 1 in the fucking world. So, my hat's off to Jessica I. But as far as this matchup, so with that being said, Jessica Rose Clark just went to a decision with the number 1 girl in that weight class, and it was 1-1 going into the 3rd round. All it came down to was that one takedown, and that's the only reason Rose Clark lost that fight. So, a couple adjustments, and I think that maybe she could win that fight because her hands definitely were looking good there. And when we talk about adjustments, she actually left Syndicate, I believe, with John Wood, and now she's training at Extreme Couture, so who knows if that's a added distraction or if that's going to make her camp situation better. But if you want to talk about distraction, Shaq, I mean, Andrea Lee, we don't need to mention what's going on there. It's well publicized, but, to lose your head coach, that's got to, I wonder where her head's at. That's all I got to say. I wonder where she's at mentally. But, man, Andrea Lee's got a lot of potential, At first, I thought it was just this gimmick with the cowboy hat, and she's got the cute southern accent and all that. But, man, the girl can fight, too, She's got some solid Muay Thai. On the mat, she's not half bad either. Some flashy submissions. She's actually fought some decent competition on the Invicta scene. So, Andrea Lee, she's definitely no spring chicken, I'll tell you that much right now. And I think she's rightfully favored, but I was thinking she should be more minus 170, minus 165, not really minus 245. So for that reason, I do think there's value in Jessica Rose Clark. And with all the added outside factors, I'll go with Jessica Rose Clark via split decision here. Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got Dwight Grant. He's minus 280. And the comeback on Zach Ottow is plus 240. Shaq, a lot of people weren't impressed with Dwight Grant in his Contender Series fight because he didn't knock the guy out in 30 seconds. Instead, he knocked him out in 7 minutes. It wasn't good enough for their standards. So I got to know, man. You think he's going to come out here and defeat Zach Ottow?
It's real interesting because I've seen him KO guys, out cold stiff, unconscious. So that's interesting. I think Ottow, personally, I think Ottow embarrassed himself his last fight, man. I think he made a fool out of himself. He's definitely trying to recover, but, the whole making videos the week of the fight, and then, you're trying to act like a tough guy when, you've been knocked out by Zach McElroy, and you've been embarrassed by Jacob Volkman. I think Ottow's days in the UFC, possibly could be numbered. I think he's a guy that capitalized on, some good opponents on the early stages of his career, like Berkman and like 37-year-old Kichi Kunamoto and 37-year-old Japanese Kuchi Kunamoto, and then 42-year-old Mike Pyle on his retirement fight. So, I think Ottow's just a beneficiary of who he's been fighting. I think every time he steps up in competition, he gets exposed. He did have that close fight with Sergio down there in Brazil. But, I mean, he's definitely an athlete. He's a former football player, but I just don't think he has what it takes on the inside to compete in the UFC or to stick in the UFC. I think clearly in that Sage fight, he definitely had the knockdown and the top control. But what happened the second they got back up to the feet? He quit. And the Legion Leon fight, I thought he quit as well. So, I think Dwight Grant might not be the best, but I definitely think he can, do his job here. I think he's got big enough shots to put fear in Ottow. I feel like Otto's a little scared to get hit. I feel like Dwight Grant's also very big, got some pro kickboxing experience, trains at AKA with Justin Willis. I think they'll be prepared. He'll have Javier Mendez in his corner, and I think they'll put away Ottow.
Yeah, I actually think Zach Ottow will make a great coach. He's got Montel Jackson under him, so I think after this fight, coaching is going to be a great career for him. And as far as Dwight Grant's concerned, man, like I was saying, people weren't impressed. Oh, sorry it wasn't a 30-second knockout. Sorry it was a 7-minute knockout. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? It's not like he took any damage in that fight or anything like that either. And then you go back and you watch that fight against Jordan Williams. And if you guys don't know about Jordan Williams, this is a kid that was on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender. He smashed his opponent. I believe he got a UFC contract. And Dwight Grant slept this kid on the regional scene badly. And you watch the sprawl of a kid like Dwight Grant because we know Zach Otto's not going to be able to stand with him. We know Zach Otto's going to try to get it to the mat. Should I mention the fact that the kid trains at AKA, or should I mention the actual sprawl I saw in that fight? Because, bro, that was an absolutely beautiful sprawl. The kid's calm out there. He's poised. And then, obviously, he's got the natural gifts. Very talented guy. So I think it's going to be a brutal, vicious, stiff KO. I think my boy Zach Otto's taking a canvas nap here. And Dwight Grant will be a new prospect at 170 pounds. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a rematch. Charles do Bronx Oliveira, he's minus 320. The comeback on Jim Miller is plus 260. Now, Shaq, the first time they fought, Jim Miller beat him via knee bar. I actually picked Charles do Bronx in that fight. And now Jim Miller is plus 260 against a guy that he finished in the first round. You think he's going to be able to repeat history here?
No, I do not. I like Charles in this fight, and I like Charles actually pretty handedly, man. I know Jim had a nice win his last fight against Alex White. Definitely, a great moment for him there, but I still think he's on the decline. I think that Charles has actually been looking pretty good, man. I think Charles is actually, beating guys on the feet. I know there are guys like Christos Giagos and Clay Guida, but I mean, since the Felder fight, he's been doing his thing. Charles is one of those guys where, he has a limit, definitely. Of course, you never know when he'll take a knee, to a body shot or a body kick. So that's definitely one thing you have to be worrisome about. But I think that Jim's gonna try to do his thing early. Charles has definitely got to be careful, but I wouldn't sleep on Charles' technical abilities here. I definitely think he could hit Jim with some shots that make him deteriorate, fairly fast and make him resort back to his old ways. I think that Jim just ran across a sloppy, just poorly trained fighter in Alex White's last fight. And I think that Charles will get a submission here. I think he'll hurt Jim Miller with a knee at some point or an elbow, something along those lines, and eventually get a hold of that neck and get another 50K bonus.
Yeah, I mean, dude, he already has the most submissions in UFC history, and now he's fighting Jim Miller, who probably has, the second or third most submissions in UFC history, so there's a chance someone is going to tap out or go to sleep. It's going to be very exciting. And as far as Charles do Bronx, you know how last week I was kind of talking about how Maheta is the best hammer but kind of the worst nail? I think I was wrong about that, Shaq, because maybe it was a weight class thing because he went up to 205 pounds and now he's been eating the hard shots fine. So, maybe I should change that. Maybe I should change that description to Charles Oliveira because he's the best hammer and the worst nail in the UFC. I mean, sometimes he's dangling off these guys' necks. He's getting calf slicers. He's an innovator. You've never seen any of these submissions before in your life. They come out of nowhere, and they're against black belts. They're against very high-level guys. And then other times, he's quitting in main events 1 minute in and making up injuries that don't exist. So, and also, how you were talking about in that Zach Ottow versus Li Jingliang fight, how, Zach Ottow didn't really get knocked out there. He just kind of covered up. Well, Cub Swanson had the famous quote after the Charles Oliveira fight. Cub Swanson said, "I don't think I knocked him out. I think he quit." So don't be surprised if Jim Miller comes out here and, if he can survive that early jiu-jitsu storm, that's the path to beating Charles do Bronx Oliveira. And if, I know Jim battles Lyme disease, and the fact that he's in the UFC, with that's just unbelievable. He's such an inspirational guy. And in his last fight, he definitely looked a little bit faster, no doubt about it. So maybe if that's under control, maybe we can see a vintage Jim Miller here. But realistically speaking, I think even though he's fought top-level competition, his whole career, but recently, guys like Trinaldo and Anthony Pettis and Dustin Poirier, so, that's why he's been taking those losses. Dan Hooker. I just think that Charles do Bronx is probably going to get off on that early jiu-jitsu storm and somewhere along the way find the neck of the very tough veteran Jim Miller and win via submission. So I will go with Charles do Bronx as a favorite here, but betting-wise, I like to only trust him. I say trust him. I like to only bet him if he's an underdog. But at the same time, if you think that Jim Miller's completely done, you think he's just going to come out here and blow him out the water, then go ahead. I completely understand where you're coming from. Next fight, we got Robbie Fonch. He's minus 160. The comeback on Sergio Pettis is plus 140. Now, Shaq, Pettis is the hometown underdog. You think he can come out here and represent for Rufus Sport?
Man, it's a very tough fight to predict to me. I think Robbie Font at bantamweight has had one of the more tougher roads. I mean, this guy's already fought a Sun Sal, Lineker, Pedro, Douglas D. Silva. I mean, he's had a tough road in the UFC, and then Sergio, one of the most high prospects to come in, just because of his brother. And I mean, this guy's got a great resume as well, and he's fought some of the best of the best at flyweight. It's just hard to read what the moving up to bantamweight's going to be like, because like we've been saying earlier, these guys moving up in weight have definitely been doing their thing. They generally do their thing their first couple fights, and that might very well be the case once again. But, man, it's just, flyweight's definitely, a lot faster, a lot more agile. So, that has its more advantages. But, I mean, when you think about the type of things that I think Rob Font has seen, or just, in terms of the stand-up department, because that's where I do think this fight will take place. I don't think Rob Font I know he does have occasional wrestling here and there, but I mean, I truly think he's going to try to stand toe-to-toe with Sergio. But, when it just comes to the exchanges, man, I just feel like Rob Font has experienced, just better, man. I feel like in terms of at least, fight-ending power, of course, Sergio's definitely more technical, more point fighty. He's definitely going to have to make Rob Font, look a step behind, look real flat. For the 3-round process. And it's definitely possible. He's done it before. He's done it against Moreno. But, those guys are flyweight. So it's really hard. I don't know which side to play it, man. I feel like Rob Font, definitely is a little slower. I definitely think, Sergio's going to have a speed advantage. But, I'm worried about, just when the one shot does land on Sergio's chin, what kind of effect, because I don't think he's been fighting guys with any type of power like Rob Font, in recent memory. The last time he fought at 35, he got dropped and finished. And, I could definitely see something, similar playing out. I definitely could see Font, falling behind and, being able to bring himself back into this fight with a knockdown or a wobble. I mean, his fight with Tomas Almeida was one of the underratedly, one of the better fights of that year, man. I thought those two stood in the pocket and exchanged as hard as you possibly could. But it's definitely going to be different reads in this fight. I lean Robbie Font. I just think that he's the more powerful, bigger guy. I think that Sergio's going to do his thing, but I just feel like the power is going to be the difference in this fight.
Man, I feel like Sergio Pettis' chin issues are kind of overrated, and maybe that'll backfire if Rob Font comes out here and knocks him out. But the reality is, man, I mean, he was just in there with Joseph Benavidez, and I didn't see Sergio Pettis getting rocked too much. You saw what he did to Alex Perez. I mean, you know how much respect I got for Joseph Benavidez? This is a guy, his only losses are to Dominic Cruz, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, and Sergio Pettis. Those are the only guys that have figured out how to beat him. So to me, that's a super high level win, no matter what the weight class is. And as far as the chin thing, yeah, he got dropped at 35 pounds, when he was 19 years old. But now he's 25. He's a grown man. So now moving up, now I think is the perfect time for a guy like that to move up to that weight class. And now it comes down to, Robbie Font. How much bigger will he be in this spot? And is he going to try to wrestle? Because I know in some of his fights, he does wrestle. He's known for his boxing mostly, but he definitely has tried to take some of these guys down. When he was in there with, mid-tier flyweight and Matt Schnell, he put him out in the first round. But I think that Sergio Pettis, obviously is a top 3 flyweight. I think it's going to be a much better performance with him moving up to bantamweight. So, there's always a chance that Robbie Font can knock you out because that's what Robbie Font does. He knocks guys out. But, man, every time he's fought a better striker, and even though you can make the argument of Sun Sao, Lineker, Pedro Munoz, all these guys are possibly on better levels than Sergio Pettis, even though Sergio's ranked higher than 2 of those guys. Sergio Pettis is a great striker too, man. So, there is that chance that Robbie Font could get countered. He could be the slower guy. He could eat leg kicks, straight punches down the middle. But there's also the chance that Robbie Font can come out here and steamroll Sergio Pettis if the size really is that big of a factor like people are making it seem. So it just comes down to which one is it. I'm going to personally go with Sergio Pettis picking apart Robbie Font and coming through as an underdog. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got Dan Hooker. He's minus 120, and the comeback on Edson Barboza is plus 100. Shaq, if this fight was a year ago, I don't think Edson Barboza would be an underdog to Dan Hooker. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, Hooker's been looking real good as of late. Another guy that moved up in weight and has, went on a run. Finish streak as well. I definitely feel like he's timing the knees up the middle a lot better. And, his training with Israel's definitely been playing off. You could definitely see him progressively, learning how to play, that similar game like Israel knows how to play. So, look out for Hooker. Edson, we know what to expect from Edson. We know that we're going to get a hard kicking, hard punching Brazilian that is going to try to knock your block off and can, technically strike for 3 rounds as well. We know that he's very chinny. We know that he can definitely slow down as the rounds progress. But we know that his hard shots can definitely make the crowd ooh and ah, and he could possibly win a decision if you're not if you don't answer back. So, I don't feel like Edson, I know he's back he switched camps to ATT for this fight. He left Mark Henry. So we'll see if that, kind of rejuvenated things. But I actually think Hooker's going to come out here, and I do think he's going to get it done. I think it's going to be a stand-up fight strictly, but I do think Edson's going to most likely win the early portion of the fight. But somewhere along the line, late in that first, towards the end of that first, I think Hooker's going to land a shot that, makes Edson deteriorate. And, I feel like that second, third round, Hooker will somewhere get the finish. It's going to be a good fight. It's definitely going to be some scary exchanges. But I actually see Hooker improving at a fast rate, and I like him to get the win here. A finish, actually.
There's a very good chance that what you just said happens. That what you just said is going to happens, man, because obviously Hooker has been knocking out everyone he's been fighting. Edson Barboza took a ton of punishment in his last 2 fights, but when you look at the matchup, there's not much of a takedown threat here. And not only that, it wasn't even the takedown defense that was the issue for Barboza. He's got fine takedown defense. It was the forward pressure, the relentless attack that these guys put on him. And I feel like Dan Hooker is more of a methodical guy, likes to play at range. And I actually think that plays into Barboza's favor because, there's three ways to beat a tall opponent. And one of those ways doesn't matter here, which is, the wrestling. So let's throw that out the window. So the two ways to beat a tall opponent in this spot are to chop down the tree, which is, the leg kicks. And guess who happens to be one of the best leg kickers in the history of the sport, Shaq? Edson Barboza. You know who was getting off on leg kicks against Dan Hooker? My boy Ross Pearson, who, he's getting up there in age. Well, now Edson Barboza's got this chance to get off on the leg kicks. The other way to beat a taller opponent, you know the deal. You know why they call it tall man defense? You go up top with big shots, man. So I think that Barboza he's primed and ready in terms of the weapons, the tools, the arsenal to go out there, chop down that tree, land those big shots upstairs. And, man, there's just one big issue with Edson Barboza, isn't there, Shaq? And it's his chin. And, people want to say that his chin issues are overrated. You know why that's bullshit? Because if his chin issues were overrated, he'd be world champion by now. If Edson Barboza's chin issues were overrated, he would be world champion right now. But unfortunately, he did get dropped by that jab by Cerrone. Do we got to go through all the times he's been dropped? Fucking Gilbert Melendez, you're 30-25ing the guy, and he still drops you. So that's why it's sketchy, because Edson's gonna pick this guy apart, chop his leg down, land big shots, and then it could be a jab, it could be a knee. So I'm just worried about him going down to one shot. But I do think, Shaq, that if it goes all 3 rounds, that Barboza's going to win the decision, man. So I'm going to go with Edson Barboza. Now he's the underdog. I'm going to go with Barboza for the upset here. Next up in the lightweight division, we got the main event of the evening. Kevin Lee's minus 350, the comeback on Al Iaquinta's plus 290. Shaq, Al won the first time. You think he wins the second time as an underdog?
Man, I'm looking forward to this fight a lot. Kevin Lee, he always, he doesn't believe in my boy Dustin. I saw his comments earlier today, but no, as far as the fight goes, Iaquinta, I feel like, when these guys generally come off a Khabib fight, when you look at the history, it generally tends to get real bad. But, I feel like Iaquinta's a tough game guy. I just feel like Kevin Lee's a different type of athlete. I feel like Iaquinta's wrestling defense, is good. But, definitely coming off that last fight, Kevin, there's definitely some openings for, the 1-2, the straight right down the middle. He's definitely a little stiff. He definitely is chinny. He's definitely been rocked in pretty much every single fight. But, Iaquinta, that's his way to win this fight. He's got to catch him. I just feel like Kevin's too well-rounded, just a better athlete, better martial artist, better kicks. Just the switching of the stance, just his presence. He's so big in there on fight night. I think Kevin has one of the brightest futures at lightweight. I definitely think he could still be a possible future champion down the line. So I got Kevin Lee by ground and pound finish at some point. I got a lot of respect for Al. I just think that his game is just not up to par with Kevin's.
Yeah, I got a lot of respect for both of these guys. Al Iaquinta, he's got that unbelievable troll account. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. You should definitely go check that out, that Al Iaquinta Realty. Pretty badass. But as far as his matchup's concerned, look, the first time, it was Kevin Lee's debut. He was green. He wasn't seasoned, and he still went out there and almost choked out Al Iaquinta in that second round. And since that point, obviously, Al made it all the way to the title shot. Kevin Lee made it to the interim title shot. Both these guys have fought for UFC belts before. Now they're competing in back-to-back main events. These guys are studs. They're badasses, man. Al Iaquinta, you could say the best part of his game is his MMA boxing, but he's well-rounded. You remember when Kevin Lee was going for that single leg against him, and he dropped down for that leg lock? He's got some slick Sarah Longo BJJ. Al Iaquinta's a well-rounded guy. Now, it's kind of interesting, though, Shaq. You know how we call some guys chinny, and, by chinny, they don't take the hardest shot. They go unconscious easily. You punch them once and they go to sleep, right? Well, with Iaquinta, it's kind of a different situation. With some guys, they're chinny. With Iaquinta, he's choky. And what I mean by that, Shaq, is that, you touch this guy's neck, and I don't know why, but within 2 seconds, he's asleep. And it's not even because he's, not a tough guy. He's as tough as they come. He tries to fight the hands. He does everything correctly. He doesn't tap out. The dude will just go to sleep. So, dude, I think that if Kevin gets around that neck like he did to Chiesa, Iaquinta's going to go to sleep in this fight, man. It just comes down to Kevin Lee. I know Kevin Lee's really cocky and arrogant. He's really hilarious. I really like hearing him talk. He's a funny guy. Like, just be smart out there. I mean, on the feet, he lands some of the hardest kicks that I've seen in a while, man. People underrate his kicks because they just talk about his grappling, and his grappling's amazing. His presence, his physicality out there, just that tie-up you saw against Barboza was just absolutely devastating, man. So I really think he's going to overwhelm Al with that physical presence, that tie-up, pick him up and slam him, land some big kicks, and eventually take his back and choke him out. And like I said, I don't think Al's going to tap. I think he's going to go to sleep. But now we got to hit up Kyle Marley for the Big Marley Minute. And joining us now on the Big Marley Minute is Big Marley himself. Kyle, you're finally back. How did DraftKings treat you over there?
Yeah, man, long time no talk. It was awesome going out to King of the Beach down there in Boca Raton. It was just really like a 4-day party, and then when I got back, I was sick like the next day, so I paid for it for about a week, but now I'm back. I got my voice ready to roll. I've been on fire, and I plan on keeping it going this weekend.
Yes, you have, my man. Everyone follow this man at Big Marley 3. Kyle, let's get right down to business, dude, because Kevin Lee's rematching Al Iaquinta. Al took the first fight. It was a very closely contested battle. Who you got in the rematch?
Got to go with Kevin Lee. He just improved so much since their first fight, and now he's one of the best fighters in that division and one of the most dominant wrestlers. I think he's probably going to win this fight wherever it goes, but if he's having trouble in the stand-up department, he's just going to take it down, and I think he dominates the fight on the ground. His last fight over Barboza, he scored 164 DraftKings points. So that's the kind of ceiling we're working with here with Kevin Lee, and I think he's a great play. You can stack the fight in cash games if you want to. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there yet, but Kevin Lee's for sure going to be in my cash game lineup. And then if you're going to take some shots on Iaquinta, I think you're really relying on the knockout because I don't see any other way he gets the win here. Great fight overall. I'm picking Lee by submission.
Now, there's a lot of mixed opinions on the co-main event of the evening between Dan Hooker and Edson Barboza. Currently, I see Edson Barboza as a plus 110, as a plus 100 in a couple books, and I also see a plus 100 on Dan Hooker in a certain book, but it looks like the majority of the action right now is coming in on Dan Hooker. Which way you going?
I'm going to lean towards Barboza, but just slightly, really. This is a fight I'm really looking forward to. I'm glad they're not giving Barboza another wrestler. We get to see him in a striking match, and Hooker's been on a roll. So I think there is some recency bias here with Hooker being on a 4-fight win streak, Barboza getting dominated in his last two. Because I think he should be a slight favorite. And with that line, and we get a $200 discount on DraftKings, I would rather go ahead and just take Barboza as the dog. The only thing is we're going to need a knockout for him to score highly because neither one of these guys is going for takedowns. And I just don't see him scoring 100 points in a 15-minute striking match. So in order to win first place in the GPP, you're really needing a knockout. So if you're confident in either one of those guys getting the knockout, definitely throw them in your lineups. But it's not a fight that I'm going to be making a point to get into my lineups. If they fit, if I have like $8,000 left on the table in my last pick, then I'll throw in Barboza. But I'm definitely not going to start any lineups here. But I'll pick Barboza to win a decision.
Robbie Font's taking on Sergio Pettis. A lot of people think it's a foregone conclusion that Rob Font's going to come out here and knock Sergio Pettis out. But Kyle, I've noticed these guys moving up in weight class have a lot of success. You think Sergio's going to get the win here in his hometown?
Yeah, I think it being in his hometown helps, and I'm actually picking Sergio to win out right here. I think he's just going to be the faster guy. He can hit and move, and then every time he hits Font, the crowd is going to react to it. So if this does go to a decision, I think Font is going to need it to be pretty clear to get his hand raised. Otherwise, I think if it's close, it's going to be going to Pettis in his hometown. I think the finishing potential and the higher ceiling on DraftKings is actually Font. But since I'm picking Pettis to win, I'm really not rostering Font too much in my lineups. And Pettis is not a guy I really want to go too heavy on either, because even if he wins, he might score like 65 points, and that's not going to help you a ton at 7,800 or whatever he is on DraftKings. So it's not a fight I'm targeting a lot, but it is a dog I like to win, and we do need dogs in our lineup.
Absolutely. So speaking of a dog, Zach Otto's taking on Dwight Graham. They currently got Zach Ottow. He's plus 250. I'm sure that the price is very low on DraftKings as well. You think he's got a chance to come out here and beat this prospect?
Man, I don't know. I think it's a low chance, and I think Grant's actually one of the best plays on the card. This fight just spells out knockout to me. His inside the distance line is minus 155, and his TKO line is minus 145. I think that's about right. I think we are going to see a knockout here, and if it's a first-round knockout, then he's going to score really highly, and he's definitely one of my favorite plays on the board.
So Andrea Lee is taking on Jessica Rose Clark. I kind of thought the line was going to be a little bit closer just based on the experience of Jessica Rose Clark. She was just in there with the current number one contender, Jessica Ai. It was a very close decision. Andrea Lee does have a lot of distractions going on outside the cage. Who you got in this one?
I'll take Andrea Lee. Not a fight that I really care too much about. It's probably going to go to a decision, and I don't really see her scoring 97 points like she did in her UFC debut. So I'm not going to be targeting her very heavily. And I think with Clark, if this does go to a decision, maybe she could be a cash game punt, and hopefully we can get like 30 points and a loss from her. But I think that's probably the best way to play her, because I don't really see her getting the win here. Not a fight I really care too much about, but I'll pick Lee to get the win.
So Drakkar Klose is making his return against Bobby Green. You know, Bobby Green, he's a mystery. I mean, he'll go out there, have some competitive fights with some really tough guys, but lately he's been losing a lot of decisions. You think that trend continues here?
Yeah, I do. And this fight has the highest odds to go to a decision. So it's really like the last fight we just talked about. I'm going to pick the favorite, but I don't think Klose is going to score very highly in a win. And I definitely don't think he's going to 10x his $9,300 salary. So I really don't have any interest in Klose. And with Green, it's more just if this is going to go 3 rounds, maybe he can get 30 to 40 points and a loss, and he's cash game playable for that reason. So I think we're kind of going to have to choose if we want Clark or if we want Green as our punt. And I don't feel confident in either one of them winning. It's just who's going to score more at a loss is kind of how I'm looking at it. And I'm okay with taking that loss in cash games because we can get our wins elsewhere. But I'm sure I'm going to have one of those two as my cash game punt and just take the points I can get. But I'm going to take Klose to win. I just think he's probably going to win with like a 75-point win, and that's not going to do you any good with his 9,300.
So Adam Milstead's taking on Mike Rodriguez. I have a feeling the winner of this fight might end inside the distance. It might be a knockout here. These are two big men. So you going with Milstead or Rodriguez?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the dog here. I think it's probably going to be high scoring for whoever does win because I think it is going to be a knockout. Fight doesn't go to a decision is minus 180, and both these guys like to strike. I don't see takedowns happening a whole lot. And like I said earlier, we need the underdogs in our lineup, and I think if Mike Rodriguez wins, it's going to be high scoring. So that's why I really like him. I'm not super confident that he gets the win, but if he does get the win, it's probably going to be like 100 or more points, and at his price tag, that's going to put him on the winning lineup. So he's one of my favorite dogs to target this week. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick him outright. I think Milstead might be lower owned, so he's worth a shot in GPPs too because he can go out there and get the knockout as well. But it's going to be a lot harder for him to reach his value at 8,700 or whatever it is compared to Mike Rodriguez. So give me the dog here, and hopefully he can pull off the upset and maybe win a GPP.
So speaking of underdogs, Trevor Smith's taking on Zach Cummings, and the one thing I'll say is that Trevor Smith is the bigger man in this fight. You know, Zach Cummings, he just lost to a 55er in Michel Prazeres. Now he's taking on an 85er in Trevor Smith. You think Trevor Smith can get some takedowns in this one?
He might be able to, but Cummings isn't bad on the ground, so I don't know how much success he's going to have there. So it's really hard for me to see him getting the upset here. I got to roll with Cummings. I just think his wrestling is going to be good enough to keep this fight standing, and I think he's going to be the better stand-up striker. I just think you're going to really need a knockout for him to reach value at that $9,200 price tag. Smith's been knocked out like 4 times in his career, so it could definitely happen. But I just think there's better targets in that 9K range. Cummins will probably make my player pool, but he's not going to be one of my heavier targets, but I'm picking him to win here.
And last but not least, the 4-0 Juan Adams. He's minus 440. He's taking on Chris De La Roca. I mean, you think it's warranted? The kid's only 4-0.
I mean, De La Rocha is terrible. So I would say it is warranted just by his size and power alone. I mean, he only needs 1 to hit, and this fight's probably over. If he gets a 1 takedown, it's probably over. So, yeah, I got to roll with him, and I think the only real issue is who you're going to pick, him or Grant, because they're both great plays. They're both probably going to score more than 100 points with a first-round knockout. It's hard to get them both in your lineup, so you're going to have to choose between one or the other, and I'm just going to be mixing them in. I'm probably going to have – every one of my lineups is going to have one of the 2 in it. And I think Adams probably gets a knockout within the first 2 minutes.
Well, that's why you are the DraftKings guy for Half the Battle. The fans can follow you at Big Marley 3. Kyle, any message for them?
Nah, man, let's get this money. Keep this heater rolling.
And that's why Big Marley is the DraftKings guy for Half the Battle. Well, Shaq, now we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So what is the fight to watch for UFC Milwaukee?
My fight to watch is Jack Hermansson versus GM3. You know, I feel like the winner of the fight is definitely going to get a big fight next in that top 15. You know, possibly, you know, an Elias type of fight or something like that. But I think that's the fight to watch. You know, a lot of money's been coming in on Meerschaert, and, you know, it's kind of like the underground main event.
Yeah, for me, my fight to watch is Dan Hooker versus Edson Barboza. I mean, let me know the last time Edson Barboza and Dan Hooker had boring fights, because you absolutely can. I mean, these two are going to go. They're going to stand and bang until one man falls, or it's going to be a 3-round war. You know, I'm very curious to see who shoots for a takedown first, if anyone. You know what I mean, Shaq? I really think that it's going to be fireworks, and there might be a guaranteed bonus check for one, if not 2 of these competitors. So for that reason, Dan Hooker versus Edson Barboza is my fight to watch. Well, Shaq, who is your fighter to watch for UFC on Fox 31?
Yeah, my fighter to watch is going to be Joaquim Silva. You know, I think he's an underrated guy at 55. I think that he's got a good opportunity to come in to, into Gordon's adopted hometown, I guess, and get a big win on Fox. He's come to the States before and won, and I think that he's got a bright future ahead of him. So, Neto BJJ.
Yeah, I'm very pumped to see the progression of Neto BJJ's career. I've always enjoyed watching him fight. For me, the fighter to watch is Sergio Pettis. You know, there's a guy that I feel like he didn't get the respect he deserved after that Joseph Benavidez fight. I already mentioned how much respect I have for Joseph Benavidez. I mean, not just because he's a legend for being married to Megan Oliveira. I mean, look at his fucking resume. I already mentioned he's only lost to Cruz, DJ, and Sergio Pettis. And in this fight, it's going to answer a lot of questions, because, you know, the Formiga fight, it wasn't really a fight. You know, he backpacked him for 3 straight rounds. No one got hurt. It was cute, you know. But now, this is going to be a real fight with Robbie Font. And if Sergio goes out here and beats Robbie Font, you know what's interesting? Because, you know, people always talk about how Sergio needs to break away from the shadow of his brother. You know, Anthony's 8-7 in the UFC, and Sergio's 8-4 in the UFC. If Sergio wins this fight, he's going to have more wins in the UFC than his brother Anthony. So I think we can, you know, remove him from the shadow of his brother. I think he's his own guy. And if he goes out here and beats Robbie Font, there's no more Anthony's little brother. You're going to be talking about Sergio Pettis, the contender, because anytime you beat Rob Font, it's a big deal, and only high-profile guys do that. So for that reason, Shaq, Sergio Pettis is my fighter to watch. Well, Shaq, we did it. It's going down this Saturday, UFC on Fox 31. Make sure you guys tune in early, because, as you know, these Fox cards are very early, and, you know, this is actually the last Fox card in UFC history. They're moving on to ESPN. And real quick, just to, you know, give a little memory a little stroll down memory lane, Shaq. You remember the first ever Fox event? Remember how it was Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos the first time, and they actually had about 59 minutes of talking, but only 1 minute of a fight because they didn't want to fuck up so bad. They had to put the perfect fight on because, the stigma of the sport and all these things. They were scared to put a full fight card on there. Nowadays, they're putting the prelims on there. They only had Cain and JDS, and the fight only lasted 60 seconds, Shaq.
That was a crazy knockout at the time. Cain was supposed to be the new generational heavyweight, and he got starched in less than a minute 30. How long was it exactly?
Yeah, I mean something among those lines, 67 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact.
But
time,
I mean, there was a lot of great fights on Fox, man. Yeah, I loved how they started putting on the prelims and letting the fighters get interviews before they step in the cage. So it's we're off to bigger and better things with ESPN, but it was a nice run at Fox.
Yeah, shout out to Fox for giving the UFC a chance because, for me personally, when I was able to tell people that don't normally watch the sport that you can put it on Channel 5 and watch UFC now, and they put on some very good cards on Fox. I remember specifically Nate Diaz versus Jim Miller. You remember that card? It was a great one. That was the same night that Alan Belcher pounded out Husimar Palhares. So they did a lot of great cards on Fox, and man, I can't wait to see what they do with ESPN. It's going to take the sport to the next level. And for those who haven't heard, Francis Ngannou is fighting Cain Velasquez. I can't wait to break that fight down. But Shaq, we got to get out of here, man. The fans can follow you at MMA Genius 05. They can follow me at Best Fight Picks. Our Instagram, Best Fight Picks Official. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Stitcher. Thank you guys so much for the support. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.